State Senator Len Suzio, and I'm here today to talk about Governor Malloy's controversial early release program. For the last 5 years, I probably have been the leading critic of the program, both in and out of office, but I'm not alone in my criticism of the program. I've had countless discussions with many Department of Correction officers and local law enforcement officials who also are critical of the law. I've been joined by people like former Board of Pardons and Paroles Executive Director John Lahda, who's with me today. John. And behind me on my right is the Hartford Police Union President, John Szewczyk. And I hope I pronounced that right. John has 15 consonants in his name and one vowel. So my apologies if I mispronounced it, John. Former victim advocate Michelle Cruz also had intended to join us today, but she got called into an emergency court appearance, so she won't be joining us, but Ms. Cruz continues to be a critic of the program as well. I can now say that Governor Malloy's controversial early release program probably can be described as Governor Malloy's failed early release program. For the last 5 years, from time to time, I've pointed out to the press some of the program's more spectacular failures, like Frankie the Razor Resto, who murdered elderly store owner Ibrahim Ghazal in Meriden in 2012, or Arthur Hapgood, who murdered little one-year-old Zanaya Calloway, as another example. Now, with 5 years' worth of experience and 5 years' worth of data, I can unequivocally say that Governor Malloy's program has failed to rehabilitate an overwhelming percent of the criminals who have received get-out-of-jail passes by the bucket load, courtesy of the early release program. Earlier this year, I sought and received extensive records pertaining to the inmates discharged from Connecticut's prison since September 2011, when Governor Malloy's early release program was first implemented. I would like to review some of the numbers in the data that was given to us. There was a total of 44,196 discharges from prison from September 1st, 2011 through December 31st, 2016. 42,674 discharges received early release credits. That's tantamount to 96.6% of all discharges at least had one RREC assigned to them. The data covered 36,616 unique inmates, and 35,679 of those inmates received RRECs, RREC, release credits. That's 97.4%. We looked at the data extensively after organizing and compiling it using computer programs, and we looked at the first year's group of criminals who were released from September 1st, 2011 through August 31st, 2012. During that period of time, there were 8,989 inmates discharged, according to the records provided to us, and of that group, 7,412, or 82.5%, have been readmitted to prison, charged with a post-discharge crime as of December 31st, 2016. Think about that. More than 8 in every 10 inmates who went through this program, supposedly to rehabilitate them, resumed their life of criminal activity and were reincarcerated in prison, having gone through the program. During the first 2 years of the early release program, 17,420 inmates were discharged with risk reduction credits, and subsequently, through December 31st, 2016, of that group, 12,629 were readmitted to prison, charged with yet another crime. That's tantamount to 72.5% of that group. Moreover, the crimes that we're talking about are not just penny ante crimes. We identified 87 murders or homicides charged to early release inmates who have been discharged having received risk reduction credits. That's more than one murder or homicide or act of manslaughter per month since the program was initiated. There were 112 cases of sexual assault, rape, tantamount to almost 2 for every month. There were 4,401 violent crimes, such as arson, assault, burglary, robbery, kidnapping, strangulation, etc. That's more than 2 per day of crimes committed by graduates from the early release program. 454 crimes were against children. That's about 2 every week. And 1,188 people were brought into prison again for illegal dealing of drugs. To me, the evidence is overwhelming that the early release program does not reduce risk. On the contrary, it does just the opposite. It exacerbates and increases the risk in our communities. The Risk Reduction Earned Credit Program is really the Community Risk Extreme Exposure Program, CREEP for short, and appropriately called, I believe, in which violent criminals by the thousands are let loose from prison long before serving their all-too-shortened plea bargain sentences already. The evidence is in that an overwhelming number of these people, these inmates, have not been reformed. They've just returned to their life of crime. It's just a matter of time. Today, the Judiciary Committee will hold a hearing on one of the bills, and one of the bills will be my Senate Bill 428. That bill proposes ending eligibility for early release credits for people guilty of killing another person, guilty of sexual assault, and guilty of a violent crime. It also proposes ending early release eligibility for people who profit from drug dealing illegally. My hope is that, and I know that today we're going to have people testifying who have impressive backgrounds. Again, Executive Director, or former Executive Director of the Board of Pardons and Paroles, John Lahda, to my immediate left, will be testifying today, and he'll have a few words in a minute to say what he has to say about the early release program. And I know that Police Union President John Szewczyk will also be testifying today. And Michelle Cruz, who had intended to be here, the former victim advocate for the state of Connecticut, will be sending in testimony. She had hoped to be here today. She had signed up, but she had to return for a court case that was an emergency meeting for her, so she will not be here in person. But nonetheless, she's adamantly opposed to the early release program. There's no doubt that the early release program is a betrayal of the people of the state of Connecticut's well-being. The Department of Correction, by PA 15-216, which was passed again a year and a half ago, was supposed to be releasing data like this to the public on a quarterly basis, but has failed to do so. In doing so, they failed not only to obey the law, but they really protect the governor and abrogate their responsibility to protect the people of Connecticut by not informing the public of the catastrophic failure of the early release program. My hope is today that at the hearing we'll have enough testimony to convince my fellow legislators that this bill should be passed. And then once the hearing is over, I'm going to push as much as I can for a vote on the bill. I want to see where our legislators stand. Are they for protecting the families of Connecticut, or are they for protecting the politicians here in Connecticut? I'm going to turn the mic over now first to John Lahda, the former Executive Director of the Board of Pardons and Paroles, for a few words. John?
Good morning. I'm here today to support Senator Suzio's Bill 428, and a couple things I'd like to point out is that one of the problems we have with the violent offenders getting these credits is that they don't go before the parole board, because when they get the credits, their parole date comes up and it kind of intersects, so they don't have the opportunity to go before the board, and that takes away from victim impact. No longer is the victim able to go to a parole hearing and tell their side of the story, which was always a very big area that we took pride in doing when I was working there. The other area I'm concerned about is 82.4% return to the prison. If we're giving these credits based on programs, then I think a study needs to be done on what programs are actually working and what's not working. Taxpayers' money goes into this. They deserve to know what's really going on here. And I believe a study in bringing people in an open dialogue between all parties involved would benefit public safety greatly. There's other areas, but I don't want to get into them right now. But again, it's the violent offenders not getting parole hearings and what programs are really working and what's not working, both in the facilities and in the community. And with all the budget cuts, I really wonder how many of these inmates are getting the proper programs, or just sitting on a waiting list and getting credits, or getting into a program that really has nothing to do with their offender accountability plan. Those are questions we need answered, and I fully support Len Suzio, Senator Suzio, in Bill 428. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John. And now I'd like to introduce the Hartford Police Union President, John Szewczyk. John?
Thank you, Senator. Good afternoon. My name is Sergeant John Szewczyk. I am the president of the Hartford Police Union, the largest independent municipal police union in the state of Connecticut. We represent patrolmen, detectives, sergeants, lieutenants, captains, matrons, animal control officers, and parking controllers. The Hartford Police Union strongly supports Senate Bill 428, an act concerning eligibility to earn risk reduction release credits. I urge you to consider the victims of these violent crimes that include children who have been victimized in the worst way by sexual predators, innocent people who were robbed, raped, or burglarized in a home invasion, or the young men that live in our urban centers that are senselessly killed every week in Connecticut. As a Hartford police sergeant, I have had to see firsthand the devastating effect and hardships that victims and their families have to go through after being beaten, battered, sexually assaulted, or even murdered by violent criminals. In many of these violent crimes, the offender is an ex-convict with a long criminal record who was recently released from prison. I have seen this time and time again. Senator Suzio already spoke about many of the statistics. However, one more I would like to bring up was a Department of Correction study completed in February of 2012. And this was conducted by the Department of Correction in conjunction with OPM. The study followed over 14,000 male sentenced offenders that were released or discharged from a prison facility since 2005. And this provided a 5-year review of recidivism. The study found that within 5 years of their release, 79% were rearrested, 69% were convicted of a new crime, and 50% were returned to prison with a new sentence. Finally, let one thing be perfectly clear. The Hartford Police Union strongly believes in rehabilitation. A conviction, even incarceration, does not mean that an individual can never redeem himself or herself and become a productive member of society. However, when a criminal partakes in violence against another individual, society should demand that the criminal serve the punishment he or she has been given. Thank you.